Today we will learn about intervals, and we shall learn from the bottoms up, which is the foundation of intervals. What exactly is the foundation to intervals? I would say it's scales. Let's use the most common scales as an example, which is the C major scale. What exactly are the intervals that can be derived from these major scales? These are the intervals for all major scales, alright? As we can see here, we have 2nd, 3rd, 6th, and 7th in orange inks, which are the major intervals in all major keys, alright? Next, we have 4th, 5th, and octave, which are the perfect intervals in all major keys. So as long as you got that straight, we can move on to another example. Let's move on to the questions that you might be asked when it comes to intervals. The C major scale and the interval of a 6, alright? Here we have C to A. Name the interval for C to A, and since it's in accordance to the scale of C major, then it's a major 6th. Major 6th. And next we have C to A sharp. So what happens here? C to A sharp. If we look at the intervals here, we have C, A. So C to A is a major 6. What happens if you go a step further? Then the distance is wider, right? When the distance is wider, it's +1. Then it's an augmented 6. What happens if it's a flat? C to A flat. So C to A major 6th. Flat is when the distance has been shortened. Okay, so when the distance has been shortened, it's -1. When you are a step closer to each other, that's -1, and it's a minor 6. Are we clear so far? Moving on, we have accidentals on C. So what happens when we have C sharp to A? So initially, C to A, major 6. C sharp to A, it's a step closer to each other, right? So when it's a step closer, it's a minor 6. What if we have C flat to A? Again, the initial distance, and C flat is when you grow one more step apart. Okay? Then it's an augmented 6. And finally, here's our bonus question for today. What if we have C sharp and A flat? And if you have an answer for this, leave your answer in the comment section below to let everyone know how you get the answer, okay? Alright, so let's take E flat as an example. If we have E flat to G, what is the interval? So from here we can see that E flat, in the scale of E flat major, we have E flat to a white key G. So it's a major 3rd. Right, that's no problem here. The problem only arises when you have accidental. So what if I don't have a flat? Alright, if we look at the illustration of the piano here, so you need to go, when you need to go from E flat to E natural to F sharp to G, this is the distance that you need to go for a major third. And now that we have E as a white key, that means our starting point will be from E, which means that the total distance has been shortened. So what happens when the distance is shortened? Major becomes minor. So this is a minor third. Let's move on to another example. Now, what if we have to go from E flat to G sharp? So what about this? Alright, the distance is still a third. So back to E flat, and then we need to go to G sharp. So what happens with the distance here? It's getting further apart, right? So when you're getting further apart, then we have augmented third. Clear? Finally, what if we have E flat to G flat? What happens here? So again, we look at the distance here. We have E flat to G. This is a major interval, and then we go even shorter than that. We get to G flat. So what happens to the total distance now? It's being shortened. So when the distance is shorter than the initial distance by a step, then you call it a minor as well. Okay, minor third. Finally, try. What if we have E to G flat? So what happens here is you have E to G flat, and the distance has been shortened even more. As you can see, if we have from the initial distance of E flat to G, E flat to G, and you start from E. So E, you reduce a step. E to G, it's a minor third, and now you reduce another step from G to G flat. So altogether from a major, you have reduced 1, 2, 2 steps. And that means when you reduce a step from major, then you get to a minor interval. And when you reduce another step from the minor, then you get to a diminished interval. Here's a bonus question for you to try out, and you're always welcome to share your answer in the comment section below. Good luck! Now for a change, let's take a look at the perfect intervals, 4th, 5th, and 8th. I will pick the 4th and the octaves. Okay, let's start with the 4th. So if I have the 4th, back to E flat major scale, right? So E flat to A flat, those are the notes on the scale of E flat major, and that would be a perfect 4th. Next, we'll look at the interval from E flat to A. Here is E flat, and here is A flat. The initial distance is a perfect 4th, and if we move a step further to A natural, then it's perfect plus 1. So that would be an augmented fourth. Moving on, we'll look at the intervals from E flat to A double flat. The initial distance from E flat to A flat is a perfect fourth, and when we reduce a step to A double flat, it's a perfect minus 1. So perfect minus 1 goes to a diminished fourth. If we look at the other way around, if I have E to A flat, if we look at the initial distance here, E flat to A flat is a perfect fourth, and from here we move on to E natural to A flat, and the distance has been reduced. So a step closer from a perfect fourth would be a diminished fourth. What about the intervals from E double flat to A flat? The initial distance from E flat to A flat is a perfect fourth, and now we move to E double flat, which means these two notes are further apart, and therefore perfect fourth plus 1 is an augmented fourth. It's time for a bonus question again. What is the distance from E to A? If you know the answer, then share it in the comment section below. Okay? Finally, we'll look at the intervals of an octave in the scale of C major. So C to C would be a perfect octave. And now comes the intervals. If I have C to C flat. Okay, so C to C is a perfect octave. There's two, right? And C to C flat, the overall distance has been reduced. So minus 1 would be a diminished octave. C to C sharp. So C to C perfect octave, C sharp, the distance has been increased, and therefore it's an augmented octave. Now moving on to C sharp to C. Now what happens here is, from a perfect octave you go C sharp, so it means the distance has been shortened, therefore it's a diminished octave. And what if we have C flat to C? The distance has been increased, so from here to here it's an augmented octave. And now it's time for the bonus question. What if it's from C sharp to C double sharp? Let everyone know how you get the answer in the comment section below, okay? Alright, here's a recap of what we've learned today. For any intervals of a second, third, sixth, and seventh, just write out the major scale for the lower note. If the higher note is the same as the scale, then it's a major. You go a step further, then you get to an augmented. Reduce a step, you get to a minor. Finally, if you reduce 2 steps from a major, would be a diminished interval. For the intervals of the 4th, 5th, and the octave, it's fairly easier. 1 step further from perfect would be an augmented interval, and 1 step reduced from the perfect would be a diminished interval. That's all for our lesson today on intervals, and remember to save the video for future reference. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.